If you were anything like me, going to the Rito village in Tears of the Kingdom tugged on your heartstrings and brought you a big helping of wonder and beguiling sadness all at once. This is my big nerd attempt at a big nerdy breakdown on how they made us cry. This video contains spoilers for the beginning premise and the Rito quest in Tears of the Kingdom. This is your warning before we dive straight in. The lands of Hyrule have been tossed into disarray, each of the various people struggling to combat various phenomena. We're still in the same Hyrule as in Breath of the Wild, which means revisiting these villages and towns holds a certain air of expectation on what we'll see, who we'll meet, and what we might hear. We've heard what a peaceful, thriving Rito village sounds like back in Breath of the Wild, with a wistful guitar and a piano urging on a clarinet playing this aching but beautiful, hopeful melody. All of that shatters as we land on the precipice of this village, and as our eyes clock just how much the blizzard has thrown the Rito into survival mode, we hear a hollow, frozen rendition of the theme that echoes everything we see. For starters, the key of the All Is Well Rito Village theme starts and stays momentarily in G-flat major when the sun is bright and out. The same passage in the nighttime rendition gets slowed down and lowered a step to F major to represent the Rito laying their heads down to sleep at night, the whole village slowing down to rest. However, when it comes to the frozen version of this theme, it begins a step above. Not below as you'd expect when morale is low, as if the town is giving all that it can and working itself to the bone just to bring in enough food to survive. This deviation of key from the original doesn't last long, but the discrepancy of the foundation there shows the tension that the blizzard has wrought upon the feathered folk, how much their normal has been disrupted and threatened. Secondly, this track plucks the most prominent notes from the main theme so that the resemblance is completely clear, but it's missing a few keynotes in between, painting an image of a village incomplete. It fits perfectly with your path as you make your way up the spiral, noticing that none of the adults are around at all, with every free hand enlisted in the scavenging efforts. The town is being held up, but it's missing a few pieces, as the kids are trying their best, but they don't have anyone there to guide them to help them recover from the mistakes and the gaps in their knowledge. The missing notes signify the missing adults and the insecurities that they left in their wake. But after only a few notes into this track, it skips forward to the B section of the original. It breezes by all the transitional, fluffy, and beautiful filling portions. It immediately skips to the next key skeletal part in the chain of musical ideas, just like the Rito have likely been doing, surviving on the bare necessities and skipping whatever joys, whatever pleasures, and whatever meals they could afford to. This track is also the first time we hear an unsettling motif that gets developed further and further as we ascend into the sky towers. By the way, I'm making a video breaking down the adaptive music of that entire quest, so subscribe, hit the bell, do all the YouTube things, so you don't miss it. Okay, so I'm tentatively calling this the Tempest motif for now, as it really evokes that feeling of a wind so strong they threaten to knock you off balance. You know the kind, the sort that you don't dare to open an umbrella in, the kind that you have to lean against to walk. This motif, played by the strings, consists of chromatic notes that go up and down. These stepwise notes convey chaos and unpredictability because even in the smoothness of their motion, there lies so much discord within it and you never know which way it's going next. Just like the wind. They're played with an articulation called tremolo, which is when a single note gets repeated very, very rapidly. This tremolo, when used in the safe Rito theme on guitar, it exuded energy, it exuded life and warmth because its notes were consonant, belonging to a beautiful melody. This tremolo, however, rumbles with dissonance and it's so much more unsettling. It's anxiety-inducing. It sounds like a tiny chihuahua shaking violently in the wind, thanks in part to its placement lower down in the strings. The strings here largely have an accompanying harmonic, foundational role in the Rito tracks, but that's exactly what makes it all the more upsetting, because these tremolo chromatics, the Tempest motif, completely disrupts the underpinning of that moment of music, even if there is a pretty melody on top. It sounds like a shaky foundation because musically it is! It's very short and subtle in the Frozen Rito track, but when it gets expanded upon when you go up the Sky Islands, it's clear that the sound is meant to make one feel as if they're being robbed of their safe footing. Arrangement-wise, the Frozen Rito theme is so empty sounding in comparison. Looking at the tracks through an equalizer to visualize where all the frequencies fall, it's clear why. The original theme has a very smooth and full, well-rounded balance throughout the frequencies. It's beautiful, sonorous, atmospheric, and clear in its identity all at once. Every instrument is acoustically performed and recorded, where you got a guitar, a piano, a string section, tambourines, and a clarinet, which is to me, one of the most warm-sounding wind instruments, leading the soaring melody. It's real, it's genuine, it's sweetly played on these instruments made of the earth, of the wood and the metal around them. It sounds like a bastion of survivors banding and pooling together their strengths and their hopes to tough out the harsh world brought upon them by the calamity. It sounds like found joy amidst a lifetime of strife, and that's what it felt like stumbling upon Rito Village for the very first time back in Breath of the Wild. But gliding there in Tears of the Kingdom, that warmth was not to be found. We land on platforms overflowing with snow, winds buffeting into us, rendering our vision limited. We venture up the steps and find that the children have been forced to take up the mantle of the adults that once kept the village running. They've been forced to grow up too quickly, to rise up and meet the demands of a difficult reality that's once more slammed into Hyrule. And it's arduous, it's tragic. But even though the adults are all but gone, off to find food, the core of the village, its identity is still there. We hear this with the Frozen Rito theme being built almost entirely of what existed in their song during times of relative peace. Even without the warmth present in the hearths and the alcoves along the treetops, that warmth remains in each and every one of the Rito we're able to meet. It's woven in, inextricable with their determination and their joy, even if that joy has been more so morphed into hope for the time being. They're still the Rito through and through, no matter how strained that identity is when we meet them in Tears of the Kingdom. The tragedy of it all hits us slowly, as it dawns just how sad it is that these feathered folk just don't get a break, and neither do we. It hasn't even been a few rotations around the sun, and already the world's descending into chaos yet again. They deserve peace. They deserve ease, time to foster that joy inside of themselves. They deserve it for all they've been through thus far. But when we arrive, before our sight can even cut through the raging blizzard, we can hear that all is not well. The familiar, resonant instruments of wood and metal have been supplanted by abnormal twists and amalgamations of piano and guitar warped together. The start of the notes, the attack, turned down so that they sound less like their original instruments. This kind of shape makes them sound a lot more like wind instruments, which is perfect considering the rising gusts that are picking up to overwhelming levels near the Rito's home. Gone are the sonorous bass lines and harmonies from the strings, the richness robbed, seeped out of the music and the village by the upheaval. There's a percussive hit that sounds like a large pack of snow blown loose from the branches, thudding onto the ground below. There's atmospheric noise that helps you feel just how cold, empty, and biting the air is. As the piece moves on, I can't even place what alien instrument plays the lead melody. It sounds like a morphed flute or piccolo, but sometimes like whistling. Regardless, it's ever-changing. It's a perfect representation of this tumultuous weather that's engulfed the airspace around Rito Village. This melody is pervasive, single-minded, looming, just like the cloud above them. It almost feels like, in this instance, an allegory for both the Rito identity as well as the struggles they face. At a first glance with an equalizer, the Frozen track is much more sparse. The notes come in peaks, frequencies dialed in tightly, and it makes the notes sound razor-sharp, leisurely violent. Even though sometimes the low and mid-ranges look somewhat filled out, it's largely the noise from the sound effects padding it all up. The most impressive thing about all of this is that it's simultaneously so atmospherically imposing, thanks to the threads it hung onto from the track it's founded upon, but also so empty and cold because of what it decided to emit. Because the guitar and piano had their attack taken away, much of the sparkle present in the upper frequencies is now gone. Those upper frequencies are largely responsible for providing proximity, intimacy, and crispness to sound. Something that provides one end of warmth. You hear this lack of closeness hand in hand with seeing how the Rito are spread thin. Children left to fend for themselves and keep things running while the adults are scattered between caves to find sustenance for everyone. Because the bass lines trade in and out with sound effects and are relegated to slow, languid parts, the lower frequencies are barren too. The very ones responsible for emitting richness, laying down rhythmic and harmonic foundations, in other words, providing security. The bass being so distant communicates just how much instability the Rito are facing, how empty their bellies must be, and how lost they must be feeling. Both sides of the sound spectrum are barren, and what parts of them still exist to communicate wrongness and unease to the player. In fact, if you use the EQ to cut into those ranges, the track still rings true and clear. If you take away the top and the bottom, what are you left with? A bad time. But also a mid-range! The mid-range is what persists. It's where the majority of the theme still gets to live on. The mid-range being the core of this track is so fitting for one singular reason. This range of frequencies is so many things, but the most stark of them all is something super innate in all of us. We humans are very social creatures, barring my own personal actions, and a large part of our evolution and survival up until this point was the cornerstone of communication, of being able to attune well to what others were saying. This, in part, is the reason we find singing voices and instruments that fall into this range so thick with expression. Think the violin, the alto sax, and the guitar. The mid-range is the range of the voice, the range of adaptation, of endurance, of survival, of what it means to be a people, even if you are bird people. It's so beautiful that the reduced, frigid version of the Rito's music exists in the mid-ranges now because it spins a tale of a village driven into survival mode. Even without knowing all this music theory, you still very much feel its effects. It paints this story of a community stretched thin, but of people still huddling close where they can, staying warm by the hearths and holding tightly in their hearts hope for a better future, so long as they can tough it out together. In spite of everything they've been through, and everything threatening to shake their world asunder, the Rito have stayed true to themselves and the values that bond them. When circumstances leave them with little to nothing, they have their identity, their community, and their hope. That is their lifeline until Link can step in to intervene, until we can get there and help. And that is how Rito Village's new track breaks your heart. Thank you so much for watching. This took so much work, and you would have my undying gratitude if you gave this video a like and shared it with your favorite Zelda fan. Those things, I know you hear it all the time, but those things really help small creators like me. Special thanks to my patrons listed on screen here, and my lovely degenerate community on Twitch. This is all possible in direct thanks to you, and I will keep working hard to make things that live spirits teach and dazzle. You can find me regularly streaming over at twitch.tv/Fariha, doing a mix of music and video games, talking about all sorts of things. Until next time, remember that you're loved. I hope you eat well, sleep well, and poop well! Mwah, mwah. Bye!